I don't particularly enjoy talking about great people like Stanislavski and, above all, making lectures and theories. But I think in this case there are some very important things that must be said, because I think that as the years go by, the greatness of Stanislavski leads to the greatest of misunderstandings. If you take a very, very simple example, in one of his books, Stanislavski describes how he would come to the theatre in the evening, and as he came into the theatre, he would ask himself the question, how can I find again the quality that I had when I played this part yesterday? Now, here you see the key to everything in Stanislavski. First of all, for a very, very sensitive, imaginative, intelligent and revolutionary man in his time, he tried to rediscover for himself what in the theatre was just ignored because it was taken for granted. We know what a rehearsal is, we know what a play is, we know what to do, and suddenly here was a man who was saying, this is not true. What was his weapon? What was his tool? Was it his brain? No. The brain was part of a great human instrument with which he tried to discover, first of all, for himself. So this question, how do you renew a performance, was not theoretical. But years later, when he had had bitter experiences, passionate experiences, and really valuable creative experiences, he could sit down in front of a sheet of paper and begin to theorize. What does that mean? He could extract words and thoughts from what in him was the material of living experience. And then he began to write about what an actor is, how an actor can and could prepare, what could help. Now, what is the dangerous misunderstanding? He expressed this so well, and this was all so new at the time, that people longing to know leapt on this as a guidebook, as a lot of instructions, like when you buy a new machine and you have a little booklet which tells you how to use it. And in all total naivety, Stanislavski's writing became the Stanislavski system. I don't believe that he ever launched this name, the Stanislavski system. All I know, and I think everyone in Russia, in the Russian theatre knows, that once this was crystallized and became a system, he himself started questioning it. And he started a new work, his work of physical actions, a whole new work, less and less documented, less and less explored and understood, because up till his death he was continuing to explore the truth behind what had become the Stanislavski way. And had he been a free man, which he wasn't, he would have said this. But what happened? Stanislavski was also a very cautious, subtle and diplomatic person who did not want, unlike Meyerhold, he didn't want a challenge. He didn't want to make trouble with the regime. He wanted to continue with good conditions to fulfill his own work as well as possible with his students, with those who trusted him. He wanted to continue. So he allowed himself to serve the big purpose of the revolution at the time, and eventually the big Stalinist period, the big Stalinist advantage and principle, to be one of the elements which enabled the Soviet Revolution all over the world to be seen in so many colors. And here was a hero of the revolution. And when in the arch-enemy, the capitalist United States, Stanislavski penetrated and started to be used as somebody who knew more than any American theater practicer, this was serving the purpose of world revolution. So Stalin quietly saw this happening. People came from the United States, from Europe, from England, they asked to see him. This was very, very carefully controlled. He wasn't allowed to see 3/4 of the people who wanted to see him. He was only allowed to see those to whom it would be useful for them to go away saying, "Ah, we have seen a great Russian citizen, Stanislavski." So he stayed in his apartment and continued working with his actors and his students to develop something which, as I said, can be discovered today, but is the reality of his work. The terrible pitfall is if we, in celebrating Stanislavski, go back into this monstrous era of a system, a teacher whose teaching we can follow in the way that in America the Actors Studio did. It had some good results and some dreadful ones. Layer and layer of stupidity and misunderstanding, and then some very fine things, because of people who have of true talent could see through the forest of accumulated misunderstandings. Today, what one must see is Stanislavski was a great pioneer. He was a great searcher, opening vast areas that nobody had ever thought of investigating. I mean, one must see that this was something new in the world's theatre, just at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, for this completely new figure, the director, the regisseur, to emerge as somebody who was in a position and had a need to question. And Stanislavski started with magnificently simple things. He just made these rules that an actor can't come in drunk to a rehearsal and late and not consider the others, consider the need to rehearse, but only what he needed or she needed for themselves. Stanislavski broke all that. By going to an extreme, he said to his actors, "The theatre is a temple." Now that is marvellous to people who think of the theatre as just a doghouse. And be told it isn't. It isn't just a place where you go to be praised and earn your money and put paint on your face and lovely costumes and feel you're better than you know you are. No. He found a shock word for theatre as a temple. But today one sees that young companies all over the world, and in the 60s very much in the United States, had the naivety to believe that they were monks and they were budding potential saints working in a temple. They were the new high priests. They say this was a temporary weapon used by Stanislavski and nothing to do with fundamental truth. You just have to tell actors, take your work seriously, think of the others, you are not alone, you're part of a team. These are today what this boils down to, but these are revolutionary concepts. What one must remember about Stanislavski, I retain two images. One is what I heard from actors, from many sources. The more he became old and understanding, the more in rehearsal he would not give indications. He would just watch with all his background, all his intelligence and his sensitivity. People would show him things, the actors would show him things, and he would, most of the time, just shake his head and say, "No, not that," in a way that made them try again. But he didn't do what Lee Strasberg did, which was to stop, get the students around him and make a beautiful, elaborate and self-important speech about what is the truth of the theatre and acting and so on and all that rubbish. The other image I have, which to me is the key that one must remember more than anything else today, he and Meyerhold were not enemies. Two men with exploring in completely opposite directions, like two explorers coming to a new country, and one goes to the right, one goes to the left. They had deep respect for one another, although they were forced to disagree because they worked in different ways with different natures, different personalities, and found different things. But each one had a deep admiration and respect for the other. This was useful politically at the time, and even today, to make this into a rivalry and to encourage the fact that, there's the good man, the loyal citizen, and the true artist, Stanislavski, and here is this man whose only quality that made him dangerous was that within a revolution, Meyerhold remained a revolutionary when the revolution was becoming more and more what everyone thought they were avoiding. It was becoming bourgeois, settled, as fixed as the bourgeoisie had been that it was trying to destroy. One man remained absolutely faithful to the spirit of re-questioning boldly in his work, which was Meyerhold. Stanislavski saw it and admired it from a distance. But when, in this act of unspeakable cruelty, which is one of the great crimes of the old Soviet Union and the Stalinist system, when Meyerhold, who for me is the great hero like Socrates of the theatre, the only martyr that the theatre has known, was first of all driven out of his theatre, and then before being murdered in this horrifying way in this freezing cold dungeon where he was kept in prison. First of all, before he was arrested but just thrown out of his theatre, Meyerhold had once opened his arms, asked him to come and join them, brought him into his opera studio, at once gave him a production of his own to do. This was all that was in Stalin's power, and even if he felt it was dangerous, his sense of honor made him feel he has to do everything so that Meyerhold doesn't disappear and his work doesn't stop. And the image, which to me is unforgettable, is that when Meyerhold came for the first time to meet all the ensemble of Stanislavski's studio, they were all sitting waiting for Stanislavski to come in, as always, and sit in the special chair that was Stanislavski's chair in the pivotal point in the rehearsal space. Stanislavski came in with Meyerhold. The students and the actors, the whole collective, saw the enemy, this disgraced man being brought in, and they were surprised. And even more so when Stanislavski took him by the arm and put him in his own seat and stood behind him. And this is the great image of the greatness of Stanislavski. That's all I have to say.